So as promised, it's Friday. It is time for another NFL Draft Q&A video. Thanks to all of you that tweeted your NFL Draft questions to me. Again, at the Jeff Schlegel is the Twitter handle. I plan on doing them Monday and Friday next week as well. So after you watch this Q&A video, if you got any questions, feel free to tweet them away. Use hashtag NFL Draft, please. If you can possibly do so, it helps me to sort through the questions and figure out what I need to do. So let's go ahead and get started. Mac Nuroff. Could you see the Cowboys trading back up into the first for Paxton Lynch if he is still on the board? They're going to have to make some type of move at quarterback, especially considering they haven't really pursued that in the offseason. Are they really seriously going into the season with Romo and then Kellen Moore as a backup or anybody else as a backup at this point in time? And there's got to be a quarterback move made there somewhere. If they don't take a quarterback at 4, I think more likely than not you would see the Cowboys potentially peel back up into round 1 to go get a Paxton Lynch. And that would be a good fit because Paxton Lynch probably isn't ready to play immediately. He wouldn't necessarily have to play immediately, although if you did need to throw him in, it would be a good situation potentially for him to be in. I think it would be a good fit for Lynch, the player, and the Cowboys as a team, and that would be a good way to go about it if they didn't take Wentz or Goff at number 4, whichever quarterback was there. Let's see here. Ben, will this draft outside of the top 10 really affect next year with the lack of tremendous talent? It could, because let's face it, no matter what we say about drafts and prospects, there will be guys all throughout the draft that come in and make an impact, that come in and contribute right away. Do I expect a lot of star performances? Not necessarily, but solid, valuable contributors for sure. Colorado MMA fan, if things check out well for Jalen Smith could you see my Broncos picking him at 31? Yeah, it's very possible. That would be a hell of a pick for them at that point in time. You're looking at it from a long-term standpoint. Jalen Smith, a guy that healthy is a top 10 talent in the draft. Some may argue a top 5 talent, and you get him at 31. I think you make that pick and you make it proudly and gladly and be willing to deal with a redshirt season in 2016. It would make a 20 cents. The Thomas O'Brien, how excited should I be about Martellus Bennett being traded to the Patriots? It's kind of one of those moves that they didn't have to give up a ton to get him. And now you've got a more effective complementary tight end to Gronkowski. If you're not going to beef up the receiving core, at least beef up the tight ends. That's exactly what they did. So it wasn't a bad move. It was a good move, actually, for both teams. The Bears needed to move on from Bennett. Bennett needed a clean slate and a fresh scenery somewhere else, and that's what the Patriots provide him. And the Patriots, like I said, didn't have to give up a ton to give him. Killer Beeman 616, if you had to take a bet on it, who would be the most successful player from this NFL draft 10 years down the road? That's interesting because even when we rate like a player the number 1 overall player or whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'd be the most successful 10 years down the road. And let's say, for example, if you had Ezekiel Elliott number 1 on your draft board, 10 years from now he'd be 31. Is he still going to be the most successful player on the board in this draft? Probably not. I would maybe skew towards a Laramie Tunsil or a Jalen Ramsey. I may go with Jalen Ramsey because he has more overall positional versatility. And even for the position that he plays, while he's a really, really good athlete, he has very, very good instincts and other things that suggest to me that he could stick and still be a star 10 years from now. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Let's see here. Fulia Georgian 1. What would be your opinion if this happens? Tennessee traded Mariota to the 49ers for all of San Francisco's 2016 picks, and they took Carson Wentz at number 1. No. Mariota is better than Wentz. Mariota is still a year younger than Wentz. You just don't do that. Well, no, him and Mariota about the same age. No. Mariota's your guy. That's who you build around. And I would not like that at all. I don't think that's good for either side. Because now you're sitting there and you talk about taking Mariota out of a situation after 1 year and plugging him into a whole new situation, a whole new system with a whole new supporting cast. And it just doesn't make sense for anybody. Let's see here. Then he also asked, do you think there's a possibility that the Niners, Bears, and Rams do not take Goff and he falls to the Jets? I think there's a possibility. I think it'd be stupid, but I think there's a possibility. You throw the Eagles in there too. And the reason I say that about Goff is some teams might be concerned about his lean frame. Some teams will be concerned about his lack of hand size. So there's a possibility. I don't think it's very likely, but stranger shit has happened. And you see this sometimes where quarterbacks get pumped up by the NFL draft media and the NFL media in general to be better prospects than they actually are, and teams just don't value the position as much in the draft if they're not lock, stock, and barrel surefire guys, and as a result, those quarterbacks can usually drop. Antonio Norman, 21. Are there any day one starters that Seattle can draft in round one on the offensive line? Yes, there is. Now, whether it be a guard or tackle, that depends. Jason Spriggs from Indiana could potentially be a day one starter for him, but a lot of guys could be a day one starter for him. It doesn't mean that they're day one starter talents, but they could start on day one for them. Cody Whitehair, the guard from Kansas State. Joshua Garnett, the guard from Stanford. Taylor Decker from Ohio State. Guys that could potentially be in that range that would start for Seattle right away. Let's see here. What do we got next? Kane Gress. If Ezekiel Elliott and Ronnie Stanley are gone for the Eagles, who should they consider? At that point in time, if Goff was on the board, that should be the pick. Even though they foolishly gave Bradford all that money, they traded for Chase Dan. You got to look at this from a long-term organizational standpoint. You've got to go with Jared Goff at that moment, you would think. Steve Areno, 1802. How effective would Miles Jack be if he were drafted by the Cowboys? And do you believe Joey Bosa is overrated? I do think Bosa is somewhat overrated. I think this top 5 talk is absolutely ridiculous. First round talent, but he is not the talent that people have made him out to be. In terms of Miles Jack being drafted to the Cowboys, I think he could be very effective there. And that would be actually a very nice linebacking core with him and Lee and Rolando McClain. It's a pretty nice linebacking core, and I think he would fit very, very well. Adam Cepeda, 30. What do you think the Texans do at 22? The common philosophy or theory is that they take a speed complement wide receiver to play opposite DeAndre Hopkins, which will lead you to think a Corey Coleman or a Will Fuller, maybe a Michael Thomas. And those guys are all very certainly going to be options there. I wouldn't be surprised if they went with a 3-4 defensive end to put on the other side of J.J. Watt, because they're going to feel like they already addressed the quarterback position. They addressed the running back position. So maybe they don't have to address wide receiver. They don't have to address a speed wide receiver. Maybe they feel like they can get a guy like that a little bit later in the draft. Maybe a guy like Sterling Shepard or Leonte Carew, something like that. Maybe they'll look at somebody like a Jonathan Bullard or a Jerron Reed. That could be options for them there. And do you think the Cowboys should go Buckner or Jack at 4? I think Jack should be the pick, but Buckner has just as much upside. To me, and as I've talked about it before, I think there are 6 prospects that are above everybody else in this draft, and those are 2 of those 6 guys. But I have Jack ahead of Buckner. Therefore, Miles Jack should be the guy, especially playing in that cover 2. He could be a Lance Briggs type of weak side linebacker with even more athleticism. That's got to be the guy. Buckner, I think, is going to be a hell of an NFL player. His fit in a Marinelli cover 2, you almost wonder if he's going to play a 3 technique role, but do you want a 6'7" 3 technique? They might want a big power end, but I think Jack's the better fit for them. Let's see here. Iceman8074, can you do vids on something other than the draft? I mean, just mix it up a bit by throwing in a topic. Don't worry, I'll be talking about some other stuff soon enough, presidential stuff and so on and so forth. It's just, this is draft season right now, so right now draft time is going to get the devotion of the lion's share of the attention on this channel. That's just the way it is. Let's see here. Balls_Sebastian. Who is a bigger bust, Johnny Manziel or Cade McNown? And I love how you had to put it in parentheses for me, the 99 Bears. Like, I didn't fucking know that Cade McNown was a 12th overall pick in 1999. Like, I didn't fucking know that. Cade McNown was a 12th overall pick. Johnny Manziel, the 22nd overall pick. Cade McNown is the bigger draft bust, and it is not even close. I do not care about all the media attention Johnny Manziel got. I do not care about this. I do not care about that. Cade McNown was a bigger bust, period. And it's even more ridiculous that the Bears sat there And a team that originally had the pick that they had in that draft, they were picking what I think it was, seventh. Was it seventh? No, or was it fifth? I fucking can't remember. Because remember, it was a 3-team deal for Ditka to go up and get Ricky Williams. I think he was sitting at 12. And all of this happened, and the Bears fucking sit there, and they end up going back to 12, getting some additional picks, what they used well later on in the draft. But, of course, as was so often the case for many years, they blew the first-round pick. Cade McNown was the bigger bust. He really, really was. Because if in that draft, what makes that pick worse is if they would have stayed where the hell they were to begin with, they could have taken Dante Culpepper. And laugh if you want, but Culpepper sure as fuck was a hell of a lot better than Cade McNown ever was. And you wouldn't be sitting there and talking about Culpepper being the massive bust like a Cade McNown was. Here, just an idea sport. Here in Germany, we got a guy named Moritz Boringer. Have you heard of him before? He's 6'4", 222 pounds, runs a 4.39, and is a receiver. I've heard of him, but I have not checked him out, to be honest with you. But I have heard the name. Goofy Aliens. Do you think D-line is still the biggest need for the Saints after signing Fairley? Would quarterback be a reach for them at number 12? They just need defensive talent. They have defensive needs at all three levels: the defensive line, the linebacking core, the secondary. So as a result, you just take the best player available at any of those positions. Defensive line is still a huge need for them. Linebacking core, especially guys that can play a guy that could play the weak side position, where you've got Kikaha maybe at strong side and Anthony in the middle. You need a weak side linebacker, and then you could use more talent at safety and more talent at corner too. Defensive line is still a huge need, though. Harbaugh, we trust. I know in most of your mocks you have the Lions taking a defensive line. You think defensive line is more important to address in round one over offensive line? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. In fact, I would say offensive line would be more important to address in all honesty, but where they would be picking and what type of talent they could get a defensive line compared to offensive line, the defensive line talent is probably better, and it's probably the direction they should be going. Let's see here. Raiders SoCal, should the Raiders trade up? Probably not. Chris Master, 10. Who should the Patriots draft with the 60th and 61st selection? Honestly, guys that are actually worth those picks. Not the freaking Jordan Richards picks and the Genio Grissom picks, but two guys that are actually worth that pick. Jordan Bryant, should the Bears draft Goff if he is at number 11? Beyond question, yes. Yes, yes. Matthew Choi, who do you think is the best safety in the draft besides Ramsey? That bowling ball of fucking machetes, Carl Joseph. He's the other first-round safety talent in this draft class to me. Killer Beeman 616. How early is reasonable in the NFL draft to draft a kicker? With the increased emphasis and importance on the extra point, I think that if anything helps the draft stock of kickers, it depends on how good you think that kicker is going to be. Like, I'll ask you this. Years ago, the Patriots took Gostkowski out of Memphis in the 4th round. Now, when you see that he's unanimously kind of thought of as either the best or the second best or no worse than the 3rd best kicker in the league, and he's been that way for close to a decade now and got probably many more years to come. If you knew that he was going to be that, would he be worth a 2nd-round pick to you? In the grand scheme of things, probably. Now, I know people will sit there and say you can get undrafted kickers that are really, really good, and that is true. But you can also get late-round picks and undrafted players at other positions that could be just as good, if not better, than the early-round picks of those positions. And that is also unequivocally true. If a kicker is that good and you think he could be that special, then you take him high. Like, for all the shit the Raiders got about taking Janikowski in the 1st round all of those years ago, Janikowski's still with the organization. They've made far, far worse 1st-round picks. I'm just saying. I wouldn't spend a 1st-round pick on a kicker unless I was a team where it was clearly my biggest need and it was the last piece that I thought I needed to become a championship contending team, and I thought this guy was worth it and could put me there and help get my team over the hump. Other than that, I'm not taking a kicker in round 1. But a guy like Aguayo from Florida State this year, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody rolled the dice on him in round 2. And I'd be stunned if he dropped out of the 3rd round. The Thomas O'Brien, do you honestly think the Patriots deserve the draft picks getting taken away from them, or is the punishment too severe? I think this is one of these things that if you don't take away draft picks, how do you punish the team? But at the same point in time, when you take away the draft picks, who are you really hurting? You can sit there and say you're hurting the organization, but you're really hurting those prospects because think about it this way. Now, in the grand scheme of things, instead of there being 32 guys that guaranteed 5-year deals that have guaranteed first-round money, there's only 31 of them. So that's one less guy that can sit there and say that we're a first-round pick. That's one less guy that can get that 5th year, that option year on his rookie contract. So who does it really hurt? You know, it's one less player in the grand scheme of things that gets drafted. You know, again, who does that really hurt? So while I understand the punishment, like the Falcons losing the draft pick and the Chiefs losing the draft pick, at the end of the day, who does it really punish? You could say it punishes the organization, and in part is true, but that's not the only person that it affects. And that's not the only group that gets punished. Those NFL prospects that are trying to get drafted and trying to get that guaranteed money, they're being affected. You look at this year's draft, the Patriots, no first-round pick. That's one less draft pick. The Chiefs for having to forfeit the 3rd-round pick. That's one less draft pick. The Falcons giving up their 5th-round pick. That's one less draft pick. So those are 3 players right there that could have been drafted that now will not be. I mean, and you say that doesn't make much of a difference, but to me it kind of does. So, you know, it's one of these things. If you find a team, you know, you can fine them $10 or $15 million, but is it really that much of a punishment if you have a billionaire owner? I mean, you start talking about maybe they forfeit games, maybe you take away home games from them. To me, I think that would be a more effective punishment is take away home games from them. Like if they do something like that, you sit there and you take away home game revenues and you take away home games and you tell the Patriots, okay, well, instead of sitting there and doing this, you're going to sit there and get 6 home games next year or 4 home games next year and 6 home games the following year. I don't know if there's a perfect punishment, though, to be honest with you. Football Phil Love, do you think the Eagles will end up taking a quarterback in the first round with all the recent rumors about it? I don't know. Maybe. It'll be interesting to see, though. They moved up for somebody at number 8. I think it's Ezekiel Elliott, but I could be mistaken. The_JVG. Is William Jackson III in play for Miami at 13 if Hargraves and Zeke are off the board? Yes, I think he most certainly is in play for him. It doesn't mean he would be the pick, but he's got to be in play for them, I would think. Let's see here. Franz Wolfensteiner. You have talked about the 6 or so premier players in this draft. How far do you think one of those players can fall? In terms of how far one of those 2 guys can fall, I think the most likely, because of the position he plays and maybe 1 or 2 questions about him and his party habits, Ezekiel Elliott would be the most likely to fall out of the top 10, but I don't think it's a guarantee that he does. You know, in terms of Wentz, I don't think he's dropping out of the top 5 for sure, top 7 for sure, and I still think he's taking number 2. Ramsey's not dropping out of the top 5. I doubt Miles Jack is dropping out of the top 5. DeForest Buckner, could there be a little bit of a chance that he might drop? There could be, but it's not very likely. Tunsil's not dropping either, so he's not going lower than 3rd in my opinion. So let's see here. Bear Faithful 1. Chris Jones is my 2nd best graded defensive lineman. I think he's worthy of a top 15 pick. What do others not see that I do? To be fair, I have not fully graded Chris Jones yet. So once that time comes and I do his scouting report, and that will be coming up this month, then we can go back and forth about that. In the meantime, I'm not sure. California EST 96. Chances a team takes Aguayo in the 2nd round. I think there's a good chance. I really do. I don't think he'll get out of the early portion of round 3. Well, I think there's a good chance. I actually think there's a better than 50% chance that somebody takes him in round 2. I really, really do. And then will Corey Coleman go before Treadwell in the draft like he should? I like how you put that, like he should. Especially with Treadwell running in the 4.6s at his pro day. Fair or not, it is what it is. It only adds to the questions about his lack of deep speed and his lack of ability to separate at the NFL level. I think with his speed and explosiveness, Coleman should go higher. and will ultimately go higher than Treadwell. But I guess we'll find out. Mike 0-1, can you see any way my Raiders land Carl Joseph or Sua Cravens? We pick 14, which is too rich, and 44 probably gone. Their range is maybe more so 25 to 40. I would say that's maybe the range for Carl Joseph. I don't know that that's the range for Sua Cravens. I might disagree with that a little bit more. I think Sua Craven's range might be more in the 50 to 75 range, if I'm being honest. But with that said, Sua Cravens would be an adequate pick for them in round 2. I don't know that he'd be the best pick for them. There's a part of me that almost says you should double up at safety in rounds 1 or 2. I'd be highly tempted to fucking reach according to many and take Joseph at 14, or maybe peel back a couple of picks and take him there, and then maybe follow up in round 2 and freaking take Darian Thompson. You have a couple of stud safeties for years. But yes, Carl Joseph would be a great fit for the Raiders. I'm just not sure they have the courage to do what they should do, which is just take him at number 14, especially with the safety coming off of a torn ACL. C_Henderson2, what do you think of Oregon quarterback Vernon Adams? Some think he's a legit first-round prospect from what I've seen. He must be fucking crazy. I see a 7th-round talent. 7th-round talent. Draftable guy, but first-round talent? What the fuck are they talking about? Let's see here. Desmake, what are your thoughts on Sterling Shepard? I'd love to see the Browns take him at 32 if he is still there. Sterling Shepard, haven't fully graded him yet. That's coming soon. So far, what I've seen out of him, I think 32 might be just a tad rich for him. But again, I haven't made a full evaluation yet, so I could be getting ahead of myself. Game on 300. Here's one. Are you going to do a live reaction video for the draft? I'm borderline on that right now. If the Bears were in the position to potentially take a quarterback at number 11, I might be more inclined to have Ashley record me doing it with a reaction, especially if they passed on to Jared Goff, and see what happens. Let's see here. I'm trying to see what else we've got. Will Steve Verino, 1802, will LA draft a quarterback? I think they will at some point in time. Rip Trey Walker, John Clint 01. Is it a 3-man race between Bosa, Buckner, and Bosa for the Ravens? I don't know if you meant to put somebody else other than Bosa, or you emphasized it was Bosa twice. I think personally, I think Ozzie Newsome would prefer DeForest Buckner. It's just my opinion. He fits more the profile of an Ozzie Newsome guy to me. But I think he would like Bosa quite a bit. Big Show Hill, could you see the Raiders trading up to get Ramsey as a potential Woodson replacement? I'm not trading up that high to get a defensive back no matter how special he is. I'm just not. Especially from the Raiders' standpoint. They've actually drafted well the past couple of years. I'm not in a position at this moment, if I'm the Raiders, where I want to forego having a bunch of picks to move up and go get one guy. You're not in that position yet. If anything, I would want to keep the good times rolling and either just stay put where you are in each round and take the best player available and take safe guys, or explore the possibility of getting more picks in this year's draft and maybe next year's draft by moving back in a couple of different rounds. Ben, if you could tell one team to make a pick, what team would it be and who would you take? At the end of the day, if it was one team above all else, and I'll take the Bears completely out of the equation because obviously that would be the bias pick. That would obviously be the team I'd gravitate to. But if there was one team and one team above all else that I would sit there and say, hey, this is your guy. If you don't take him, you're fucking stupid. That's why I bought the team. That's why I'm in charge. We're taking this guy. Fuck you. It is the Cleveland Browns and Carson Wentz. And again, I'm going to emphasize this. It is Cleveland and it is Carson Wentz. It is Carson Wentz and the Cleveland Browns. This is like something that is so glaringly, apparently freaking obvious to me that it has to be this way. If the Titans take Jalen Ramsey, makes a world of sense at number 1. It does. They take Tunsil at number 1. Makes a world of sense. Chargers taking either one of those two guys at number 3. Or even DeForest Buckner. Makes a ton of sense. The Cowboys taking Miles Jack. Or if Jalen Ramsey somehow was there. Or they took a Jared Goff or a Carson Wentz. Again, that makes a ton of sense. The Jaguars taking Miles Jack. Makes a ton of sense. But when it all comes to pass, one team above all else, it has to be the Cleveland Browns. They must finally find that dude at quarterback. That dude is in this draft. That dude should be there in their laps at number 2. That dude is Carson Wentz. He is the anti-Manziel on so many different levels. You take him, and I promise you, your organization instantly changes. I promise you, nobody laughs at the Cleveland Browns anymore. You're not going to catch me calling them the Cleveland skid marks anymore. This is something that is so glaringly fucking obvious that it must be the pick, that it would only be the Cleveland skid marks that could possibly screw this up. There was one team whose front office I could take control of and say, I've got one pick and I'm the one making it. I don't give a fuck about your opinions because I know I'm right. It is quarterback Carson Wentz from North Dakota State. And I promise you, Cleveland fans, you would not regret it. Thanks again to all of you for all of your questions. This took longer than I thought it was going to be. Wow, a lot of good questions this time. So I'll be back Monday with another Q&A video. In the meantime, check out some of the other draft-related content on this channel. See